Hello, everyone, and welcome to this virtual summit on climate and health hosted by the Consortium of Universities of Global Health. My name is Dr. Michelle Berry, and I'm the chair of the board of CUGH and director of Stanford Centers for Innovation in Global Health. It's my great pleasure to be kicking off this event dedicated to identifying and amplifying high impact solutions to climate change and its health-related impacts. This topic couldn't be more timely or more urgent. You've likely read the many recent reports warning us of the existential threat posed by climate change and the need for urgent action to mitigate its worst effects. But you would be hard pressed to find a corner of global health that will not be impacted by the ongoing environmental changes we are causing. And because of that, climate and health has become a major focus point for the Consortium of Universities in Global Health and will be the focus of our 2022 annual meeting at the end of March. During today's symposium, we will hear from experts around the world share their innovative solutions and ideas for change. You are encouraged to share suggestions and ask questions in the chat function. The solutions identified today will be shared publicly with policymakers, including those at the upcoming COP26 meeting in Glasgow. Thank you for joining us to be part of this critical movement. It's now my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Jonathan Patz. Dr. Patz is the director of the Global Health Institute at the University of Wisconsin and has served as lead author for the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and co-chaired the health expert panel of the first US National Assessment on Climate Change report to Congress. He, like many of us, are committed to connecting colleagues and communities around the world to improve health for all. Dr. Patz, I'll hand it off to you.
Michelle, thank you very much. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are tuning in to this climate change webinar. The timing of this webinar is entirely intentional, as Michelle referred to, just weeks before the 26th United Nations Conference of the Parties begins its negotiations in Glasgow. The World Health Organization is calling this year the Health COP, with representation from thousands of health organizations converging in Glasgow, because after all, health is one of our most central concerns with the climate crisis. This webinar also comes just 2 days ahead of the annual conference of the US National Academy of Medicine, which has placed climate change at the top of its list of urgent priorities. More on that later. So without further ado, it's an honor to introduce our first very distinguished speaker as we start a roadmap to COP27, which will be held in Africa next year. Professor Agnes Binawaho is a Rwandan pediatrician who returned to Rwanda in 1996, just 2 years after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Since then, she's provided clinical care in the public sector, first serving as the executive secretary of Rwanda's National AIDS Control Commission, then as permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health, and 5 years as Rwanda's Minister of Health. She co-founded the University of Global Health Equity and currently serves as the university's vice chancellor. Professor Binawaho also founded the Rwanda Pediatric Society, chairing it until 2019. She currently serves as senior advisor to the Director General of the World Health Organization and as a member of the board of directors of the Rockefeller Foundation, as well as other boards. Since 2016, she's been a member of the American Academy of Medicine, and since 2017, a fellow of the African Academy of Sciences. In 2015, she received the annual Rue Prize and Ronald McDonald House Charities Award of Excellence, among many other of her distinguished awards. So it's a true pleasure to work with her as a member on CUGH's executive board, and an honor to introduce her as our opening speaker. Thank you very much, and over to you, Agnes. I can't hear the sound.
It gives me great pleasure to take part to this CUGH virtual summit to give my views on how climate change is important for Africa. Among all the important issues, I will insist on two. First, on the fact that if the continent wants to keep the health improvement made during the past decades and increase them, we need to adopt a systematic One Health or planetary health approach to prevention, care, treatment, and curative health service delivery, and also in all health science education. The second is that if the world wants to succeed in controlling climate change, the rich world needs an approach embedded in equity, because what they want to impose will harm Africa. To have the whole story of CO2 emission, we need to use the per capita emission measurement, which measures the total emission per person annually, and an African contributes an average of 1.11 metric ton per year. One European contributes 7.28 ton, an Asian 4.4 ton, and a person from the United States of America 16.06 ton. So Africa produces 16 times less CO2 than an American. And while Africa is the continent that produces the lowest carbon emission, it remains the primary victim of climate change. For example, between 1970 and 2019, Africa recorded near 1,700 disasters, which caused the loss of more than 730,000 lives. 5 times life more lost than in Europe for the same number of disasters. And North America, Central America, and Caribbean combined suffered around 10 times less death from disaster during that period. Among the disasters we are used to, we need to add an increase of a range of infectious disease due to an increase of their vectors due to global warming. All this compromise the effort of sub-Saharan African countries that have to spend more money to mitigate the situation and treat more diseases, diverting the money from their own development plan. A second crucial point is that the implementation of the solution to reduce CO2 emission is full of hypocrisy, and again, will penalize regions such as Africa. We need to stop using fossil fuel and gas. Okay, or we will have no access to funds for green energy transformation. Okay, but Africa produces so little CO2, while the Western companies are still exploiting those resources, fossil fuel and gas in Africa for your cars, doing more business than ever. Also, the Western countries, while threatened to boycott Africa for using gas and fossil fuel, don't apply this rule for themselves.
Is it there?
For example, Germany closed a nuclear plant, and yet at the same
I thought that yesterday.
3 gigantic petrol exploitation fields. If the world wants to be equitable, CO2 emission should be calculated only per capita. This will mean that European Union and the US should drastically reduce their emission now, while Africa should even not change it for a while and transition slowly to green energy while still using gas and fuel for its development, food security, and survival. Because an African produce 16 times less CO2 than somebody in the US and 7 times less than someone in the European Union. However, the international legal document wants to penalize Africa for gas and petrol use without giving penalty to the high-income countries doing so. This will push us deeper into poverty and poor health because our economies cannot take off today and bridge the wealth gap if we use only clean energy now. Therefore, it is imperative that in universities of health science, we teach the One Health or planetary health approach to ensure that we contribute efficiently to respond to the climate change effects and find ways to improve health outcome for our global communities, and that the world became more equal and more just, and give the time to regions like Africa to transition at their path. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you all a productive meeting.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Maureen Lichtveld, the Dean of the School of Public Health at the University of Pittsburgh, a proud Caribbean native, a proud member of the National Academy of Medicine, and an equally proud member of the board of the Consortium for University and Global Health. To demonstrate that climate and climate change and health is a global perspective, you just look at the lineup of our speakers this morning, beginning with, before we go to the speakers, beginning with the general overview of this close connection between climate and health by a very honored speaker, President Victor Zhao of the National Academy of Medicine. It's my honor to introduce President Zhao now. He, in addition to the president of the National Academy of Medicine, he serves as vice chair of the National Research Council. Dr. Zhao is Chancellor Emeritus and James B. Duke Distinguished Professor of Medicine at Duke University. He is the past president and CEO of Duke University Health System. He also was the chair of the Department of Medicine at Harvard's Medical School Women and Brigham Hospital, and the chairman of the Department of Medicine at Stanford. He's an internationally acclaimed physician, scientist, and leader whose work has really improved health and medicine, not only in the United States, but globally. For example, his work in cardiovascular medicine led to the development of ACE inhibitors, of course, used globally as an antihypertensive. Dr. Zhao is also a leader in health and health policy. At the National Academy of Medicine, he's leading important initiatives such as vital directions for health and healthcare. Particularly under his tenure, he has advanced to improve efforts around health equity and address racism throughout programmatic activities at the National Academy of Medicine. Most recently, the National Academy of Medicine launched a grand challenge in climate change and human health and equity to reverse the negative effects of climate change on health and social equity by activating all of us, the entire biomedical community, by communicating, by educating the public, so that we can drive change in research, innovation, and policy, and including the bold action to decarbonize the health sector. As a global health leader, he helped design and launch, among many other scholarly activities, the National Academy of Medicine Global Grand Challenge for Healthy Longevity. He has led, most recently, our Academy's response to COVID-19, which includes numerous committees, just-in-time scientific information on a host of very critical topics such as vaccine allocation, health equity, and mental health. He's worked tirelessly on the global response for COVID-19, and particularly his critical and principal role on COVAX, the global collaboration for accelerating the development, manufacture, and equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. He's an active scientist, not only in the US, but globally. He served as a member of the National Advisory Committee to the Director of the National Institutes of Health. He has chairs the Global Futures Council on Healthy Longevity. In addition to all of that, he's also received many distinguished awards, including the Distinguished Scientist Award from the American Heart Association, the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. He became an honorary citizen in 2019 of Singapore. Of course, he's been elected to the National Academy of Medicine, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the European Academy of Science and Arts, the United Kingdom Academy of Medical Sciences, the Japan Academy, the Mexican Academy of Medicine, the Chinese Academy of Engineering and Academia. And in addition to all of that, President Zhao received 16 honorary doctorates. So it's only fitting for you to join me in welcoming President Victor Zhao.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Victor Zhao, the president of the National Academy of Medicine in the United States. You know, it's a great pleasure to be here with John Nkankasong to talk about climate change and human health. Let me begin. Many people think of climate change as a looming environmental disaster, more threatening to future generations than to themselves right now. But truth of the matter is that approximately 20 million people are already dying each year globally because of key factors linked to climate change. In fact, in my opinion, climate change is a public health crisis. Today, I want to send a message to the global health and biomedical community, the importance of us getting engaged. Because I believe that we in health and medicine have an obligation to act and to start treating climate change as a public health crisis. We can and should help raise the alarm and communicate about these threats. We have a duty to advocate for health and equity to be the center of climate change planning and policy. Also, importantly, we must recognize the health sector is a major contributor to global carbon emissions. For example, in the US alone, we are responsible for 8.5% of all of US carbon emissions. Globally, the health sector across the world is a major contributor to global carbon emission. For example, the health sectors, United States, Australia, England, and Canada together emit a combined 748 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents annually. If these four health sectors were an independent nation, it would rank 7th in the world for greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, we, the health and medical community, must be part of the solution. We must hold ourselves accountable for reducing healthcare's considerable carbon footprint. That's why we, the US National Academy of Medicine, got involved. As the premier health and medicine academy and the trusted advisor to the nation and the world now, the NAM is uniquely positioned to mobilize health and medicine across the public and private sector. So we've launched a signature global initiative, the Grand Challenge on Human Health and Climate Change, with an initial focus on US, but the goal is to collaborate with our peers across the globe. The Grand Challenge focuses on reversing the negative health and equity effects of climate change by activating the entire health and biomedical community, getting everyone involved, communicating, educating the public about climate change and health, driving changes through research, innovation, and policy, and take on bold actions of decarbonizing the entire healthcare sector. So our grand challenge will focus on the following strategic objectives. First, communicate that the climate crisis is a public health and equity crisis. Second, develop a comprehensive long-term roadmap for systems transformation. Third, prioritize and capitalize multi-sectoral actions to drive health sector transformation. And fourth, stimulate bold and interdisciplinary solutions to accelerate the pace of innovation and transformation. As an important part of this grand challenge, we recently launched our Action Collaborative on decarbonizing the US health sector. It's a public-private partnership bringing together leaders across the entire US health system, the federal government, industry, hospital system associations, private payers, clinicians, health professional educators, academia, nonprofits, among others, all together to identify and implement actions aimed at reducing the environmental impacts of the health sector and strengthening resiliency and sustainability. We're particularly excited to work closely with the Biden administration and with Dr. Rachel Levine, the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, as she is now a co-chair of this collaborative. The Action Collaborative will focus on reducing carbon footprint by focusing on 4 key areas, which we organize as working groups. First, healthcare infrastructure and supply chain. Second, healthcare delivery. Third, health professional education, communication. And finally, policy, financing, and metrics. I'd like to close by saying that we endorse the 3 lenses that CUGH has highlighted, and the work of Grand Challenge is consistent with these 3 lenses. First, in our roadmap, we will outline policies needed to transform the systems that most significantly contribute to and are being impacted by climate change, all with a focus on improving and protecting human health. These systems include food, agriculture, energy, transportation, construction, and manufacturing. Furthermore, in our Grand Challenge, we will also address green financing, nature-based solutions, and healthy cities. We're really interested in bringing innovation to these areas. And finally, our goal is to collaborate with leaders everywhere in other countries, especially those in Africa, to catalyze actions in their respective countries to help communicate climate crisis as a public health and equity crisis and to drive actionable change. So I'd like to commend CUGH for bringing us all together for this virtual summit and with a focus on the road to COP27. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Zhao. We're now excited to transition into our first panel. But before we do that, can I please ask everyone to mute and turn off your camera if you're not speaking?